Welcome back to JDC 24/7, the digital class in Tanzania. My dear and near little girls and boys, standard 3 pupils. Today, we continue with the science and technology, and the topic under concern is communication. Now, let us start talking about communication. What is communication? Now, communication is the process of sending information or ideas from one person to another. Pupils, communication, as I have said, is the process of sending information or ideas from one person to another. For example, now I am communicating to you, I am sending or passing my ideas or information to you so that you understand what is communication, is it? That's right. So in case someone asks you about communication, you can just define communication is the process of sending information or ideas from one people or from one person to another. There are 4 major types of communication. These are 1. Spoken or verbal communication, 2. Written communication, 3. Unspoken or non-verbal communication, 4. Symbols or signs communication. Now here comes, when we talk about spoken or verbal communication, we are simply talking about the communication of which it is undertaken through talking, I can say, or through speaking. Like now I'm speaking to you so that you understand, is it? Yes, so I'm speaking to you so that you understand about what I wanted to speak about or what I'm speaking to you. So speaking or what we call verbal communication is one of the major 4 types of what we call communication. And the other is written communication. As you see here, written communication, however I'm talking, but these materials or these what we call information are written. That is why I'm reading from. So written communication is one of the what we call communication. Apart from talking, I can handle these what we call materials to you so that you read because they are written. Understood, pupils? Yes. So unspoken or non-verbal communication. Yes, let us come to here. Sometimes when I call you John or Precious or whoever, you are likely not to respond to me, but through not responding, you are communicating some of the ideas to me. You are communicating. However, it is not a sign, it is not a symbol, but not just not responding to me. It sometimes communicate that, however, I have called, but you didn't even responded. But sometimes you are likely to communicate a bit about what you mean. Sometimes when you commit mistakes, and the teacher called you guys, you know specifically that he wants us not to make noise. So you don't need to respond, but you have to follow the instructions as long as you have understood, and the teacher is going to understand that through this they understood. Is that okay with you, pupils? Right. So when it comes to symbols or signs communication, this is the kind of communication of which it uses symbols or communication. For example, sometimes you are likely to pass somewhere of which someone is doing like this. You know he or she is calling me, is it? Hopefully that is right. So when someone is doing like that, like this, you know that he or she is calling. Or when somebody is doing like nodding his head like this, so you know that he said okay, or he said yes, or something of this nature. So we have to understand about these kind of communication, about these 4 types of what we call communication, right? Okay, now let us come to what we call methods of communication. Methods of communication. Now here we have to say that there are 3 there are 2 methods or ways of communication. Now these ways, as we have to take into account, are like what we call traditional means. These are traditional means of communication and the modern means of communication. So the methods of communication, an individual can communicate, as we have said, or can pass information or ideas from one people to another. And the way in which these information or the ideas are passed through will depend upon the methods or ways of which the methods or the materials or the so-called message is being passed through. So we have what we call traditional means of communication and the modern means of communication, right? Now, when it comes to what we call traditional means of communication, we are simply talking about the way in which communication uses local or traditional tools to pass information from one people to another. Some of these tools are like drums, bells, trumpets, horns, guitar, marimba, whistles, and so on. So here in a traditional means of communication, this is the way, as we have said, in which the communication uses local tools, as we have seen down there. So the local tools or traditional tools to pass information from one individual to another. Understood, pupils? Understood? Yes, so as we have talked about these drums, bells, trumpets, horns, guitar, marimba, whistles, and so forth, these are some of the communication devices, or I can say the so-called communication medium or tools in which they are used to communicate information in traditional ways. It includes drums, as we have seen, and the bells, like you see here. Trumpets, as you see, one of the trumpet is here, and the horn of boo, boo. People are horning these, what we call a horn, so that you can hear what is going on. For example, in case they have a so-called village meeting, for example, people use it to horn or to beat what we call drums, so that people understand what is going on, right? Yes, so things like guitar, like marimba, in church, most of us guys in church, we do plucking what we call guitar wires, so that to add up the rhythm of the so-called songs and so forth and so forth. And these marimbas with these headings, things like doing so these are one of the so-called traditional ways or traditional methods or tools in which these information or ideas are being spread out or are being communicated from one from one people to another, right? Understood? Yes. If that is, then let us continue. Let us come to modern means of communication. Now, in the modern means of communication, this is the way in which communication uses modern tools to pass information from one people to another. Now, it is the way when it comes to what we call modern means of communication. This is the way in which communication uses modern tools to pass information from one people to another. Some of these tools are like television, radio, computers, newspaper, telephones, and so on. So these are some of the tools of which are being used to pass information through, or I can say from one person to another, or from one destination, or whatever we could say, from one place to another, by the means of these what we call modern tools. And as we have said, the modern tools of communication include what we call radio, television, computer, newspapers, telephones, and so on and so on. Now here, as you see, this is the radio. You know, people are talking, or you can send information or spread information to people or around the world through this device or a radio, or people can hear from any broadcasting entity, or from any broadcasted what we call what we call news through radio. Understood? And the television, this one is the television, of which it will communicate, or it will make communication easy. It will send both what we call, or give out what we call both audio and what we call video. That is very, very interesting. And the computer is what we call what we call modern device of communication. As we are doing now, I'm using computers to communicate it to you, right, guys? Now here, these are newspaper, like Daily Express, The Guardian, Independent, whatever. So there are different what we call news, of which people are reading from here and there to get information from. Understood? Yes. So the phones, or however, they are of different. We have landline and we have what we call the mobile phones. But however, all these are called telephones or phones. These are also in modern ways of communication. Now, let us come to one device after the other. However, we are not going to touch all the devices. Let us talk a bit about a radio. A radio is a tool, as we have seen up there, as you have seen a radio. Now, a radio is a tool of communication that it transfer audio information. So it is a tool of communication that it transfer audio information. The following are 7 important parts of the radio. You have to remember that a radio may have more parts, or different parts, or a lot of parts, of which they are to be taken into account. But these 7 are very important, and they must be present for the radio to be taken into account. Now it must have a speaker so that you hear from. The radio should have a speaker so that we hear what is being said or talked about. Is it a volume button? And now the volume button there will be to add voice or reduce according to the preference, right? The meter band will contain what we call numbers, of which these stations are found at. So there must be a meter band, and also an antenna for maybe strengthening or searching signals. And also it has a tune button, of which it is going to tune or to put in the station under consideration that I need now maybe 85.5 megahertz or whatever. Then the tune button will place that to the specific station you are after. Now, for the matter of the handle will be here, is needed there for taking what we call, or for handling, or for of course, like doing or holding this radio or carrying the radio easily while listening or doing whatever. Handle, and the on-off button to switch on or off. As you see, this is an antenna of which it is there to search for signals and so forth, and the handle, as you see here, for handling, and the meter band is here, of which it contains numbers for different stations, and also a volume button, of which for this radio it is the same button of which it is going to be used as the on off button. And also there is what we call speaker, as you see over here, and the tuning button to search different stations, right? Understood? Now here, let us continue with after talking a bit about radio, let us talk a bit about television. Now, a television is a device or a tool of communication that gives out audio and video information. The parts of television are like the following. Now, before maybe we get deeper into the parts of television, we better have a look on what we call television itself. As we have said earlier, that it is the device that communication, or that its communication is through giving out what we call audio and video information. The parts of television are as follows. The television should have what we call speaker, as we have talked about for the part of radio. It has also to have speaker so that we hear from it. And also it should have a volume button, whether to add volume or to reduce the volume. And there must be cables to be plugged, whether to join it with the receivers or to join it with the different other things. And also the power cable also must be there in order for it to function properly. And there must be what we call also the so-called antenna. The so-called antenna for signals. However, nowadays most of people are not using antennas. They just use dishes or something of that nature. But antenna is one of the common device of which it is needed to be found in the television. And also it should have what we call screen or monitor, the remote control to control what is going on or to change different things over there, and the on-off button of which we have talked about earlier. Now here, this is the monitor, this is an antenna, as we have talked for the matter of radio, and this is the volume button, the off on button of which it is like that, and the speaker is here, and this is the monitor or the screen of which the image is going to be seen over here. And the voice is going to be heard through these speakers. That's all about what we call the so-called television. Understood, pupils? So the television, as you have seen, some of them are now the modern television like this. It will give out what we call audio and what we call audio and what we call videos, right? Yes. Now let us come to telephone. Wow, telephone. I know you always used it to use telephone most of the time. Now a telephone is an instrument designed for the simultaneous transmission and the reception of what we call human voice. So in a telephone, you send and receive at the same time. That is why we have said a telephone is an instrument designed for the simultaneous transmission and reception of what we call human voice, right? Yeah. Now there are different types of telephones, but the major ones are like the following. Now we have these two types of telephones. One of them is what we call mobile telephone, like you see these ones are the mobile telephones, and the other one is landline telephone, or you can just say a wired telephone like this one. So it is a landline telephone, and these are the mobile phones. Understood? Yes, so these are the two types of what we call telephone, the major types of telephone. However, they are likely to have different lookup or the way or the appearance or whatever, but these two types are to be taken into account, that if not landline telephone, then you are likely to have mobile phones, right? Yes. Now either of the two types of what we call telephone will have the following important parts. So the important parts of what we call telephone, first of all, it should have screen of which it is going to show maybe after typing the numbers or whatever there. So it must have a screen, and also it must have a keypad. Say keypad. Right, you are right. So it should have a keypad. It should have a microphone as well to send in, because this is an input device to send in voice, so that is someone who is over there can hear. And also a speaker, because when you are sending through microphone, also someone is going to talk back to you, so you must have a speaker so that you hear what is the response from your neighborhood or from the one you are calling, right? And also it should have on-off button. That is obvious, okay? So the speaker, most of the what we call phones, even if you go and look at your daddy's phones or mom's phones, you'll find the speaker will be somewhere up here, and the screen, as you see over here, and the so-called mic will be somewhere here. However, it is inside, so you are not going to see, but you have to remember the mic is the one which sends information, or which sends data, or sends whatever I could say in, so that someone is listening or hearing from what you are talking about. And the keypad, like you see here, it has numbers and alphabet, so that you can type text or you can type numbers through this keypad, and the on off button to switch on and off the so-called what you call mobile phones, right, guys? Right, so now here let us talk a bit about the computer. Let us talk a bit about the computer. Now, what is a computer, by the way? A computer is an electronic machine that processes input into output. That's all. So it is an electronic device or machine that processes input into output. If this is the case, then the so-called computer should have input. It should have input so that it processes it into output. Understood? Understood? Yes, exactly. And here is when it comes, and we are going to talk about the way input, as we call data, that computer receives data from input devices. We are going to talk more about this later. From input devices, then after processing, it gives out the result through output devices. Again, also the same computer has ability to store or to keep the information and the data for either permanent or temporary. But what you bear in mind, little girls and boys, you have to understand and know that a computer is an electronic machine that processes input into output. That's all. Now, hence, the device or the devices that send data into the computers are called input devices, and those that gives out the results are called output devices. So the computer are likely to have these kind of devices. However, it is likely to have more devices like storage devices, processing, whatever. But the so-called computer, it receives input from input devices and give out the results through what we call output devices. So it has to have all those things. Now you have to bear in mind again that any device that is attached to the computer is called what we call computer peripheral. It's called computer peripheral. So any device, whether input device or output device, as long as it is attached to the computer, is going to be regarded as computer peripheral or peripheral devices. It can be an input, output, or storage device. As long as it is attached to your computer, we will term those as input, or like I can say peripheral, right? Okay, guys, let us come to talk a bit about input devices, because we have taken into account what we call input devices. We have taken into account what we call computer. We have defined the so-called computer and talked about peripheral, that any input or any device that is attached to the computer is likely to be what we call peripheral. Is called peripheral. And now let us talk or classify these peripherals or devices into input devices, output devices, and storage devices. Now, as the startup, we better have an examples of input devices. Maybe as the point of interaction, as the point of understanding, you have to bear in mind that these input devices are the devices which are attached to your computer, so that they send data in. They send data in. So you send data in the computer for processing through or by the use of input devices. Right, kids? Understood? Yes. Now let us come to give out the examples of what we call input devices. Now we have the keyboard. The keyboard is one of the input device. It gives in letters, numbers, symbols, and so many other things into the computer so that it processes. The other thing is the mouse. We have the scanner, we have microphones, we have digital camera, we have webcams, yes, and joysticks. All these are the input devices, and some more other devices which sends in what we call data for processing, right? Okay, now here let us continue. This is the keyboard, of which it is an input device. We have the mouse. This is an input device. Webcam is the input device. The scanner, as you see here, is the input device. The digital camera, as you see over here, it is an input device. The joystick here, of which it is used for gaming, or you can use it to play games in computers and so on. It is an input device. And the microphone, as you see here, you can use to input voice in the computer, right? Understood, kids? Is it okay with you? So when it comes to computers, we have said, or what we call examples of input devices, as we have said, these are the keyboard, mouse, scanner, microphone, digital camera, webcam, joysticks, and so on and so on. But the commonly known ones, as we have said, so the keyboard, the mouse, the so-called webcam, the scanner, the digital camera, joysticks, and the microphones, as we have discussed. Pupils, hopefully you have understood what are input devices, right? Yes. Now let us come to output devices. Now, output devices, these are the devices, when we talk about output devices, now these are the devices which are attached to the computer, or we can just say the peripherals which are attached to the computers for giving out the results after processing, after manipulation or processing. We get output from output devices. Now, for example, I want to type and give out my name, that my name is Joshua, for example. I have to type through input devices. Then to see what I have typed, I will see through the screen or the monitor as an output device. Is that okay with you guys? Right, let us continue. So we have one of the output device, the monitor or the screen, of which it is there to display what has been processed in the computer. And we also have the speaker. After maybe sending information or sending data, of which we call maybe voice through microphone, then in order to hear, in order to take output from there or from the microphone, you will take through what we call a speaker. So you will hear the voice from the computer through speakers. So speaker is one of the output device because it gives out what has been processed in the computer. Understood, guys? Right? Yes, that's correct. Now here the printer is also one of the output device. It gives out the processed goods, like in schools, like you do at your school, whatever we could say. You give, or the teachers are giving you tests of which they have been typed. Now after being typed, they print out, or the printout is given out through what we call a printer. Now a printer is a device or the output device which gives out the result in the form of hard copy, but still it is the output device. Understood? Yes, also we have projector. A projector is for projection now. Yes, so sometimes when you go in theater or somewhere else, you find or you see someone who is projecting things on the wall, like here. So someone is projecting things of which it is processed in the computer on the wall through the help of what we call projector. So projector is one of the output devices. Understood, guys? Right? Yes, so these things are all going to be taken into account here. So we have headphones. Say headphones. Right, so you are right. Now these headphones are also here for what we call hearing what has been processed in the computers. So it is one of the output devices. Headphone is one of the output device, and plotter is the big printer, I can say, for you kids. It's a big printer. If you go to somewhere like in town, you see a big write-ups or whatever we could say, of which it says don't do 1, 2, 3, 4 in the big write-ups. These printout, or I can say the printout, the big printout, are being printed by the help of the so-called plotter. The so-called plotter, you find something Vodcom, power to you somewhere there. It is printed out by the use of plotter and not a printer, as it should be taken into account. So here, these are the output devices, as we have said. One of them is the microphone, as you see here, is one of the output device. We have speakers. These are the output devices, and we have a printer, like you see here, is one of the output devices. The monitor or the screen is one of the output devices. The plotter, the big printer, yes, it is one of the output devices. Then the projector is for projection, and you have to bear in mind is that this one is also the output device. Understood? Right. Let us come to talk a bit about storage devices. Let us come to talk a bit about storage devices. You know, the computer keeps or store information, but it should store information by the use of what we call storage devices. Now, what are the storage devices? These are the devices which are used to keep information and data. To keep information and data, or I can say information and data are kept in the storage devices. Right? Understood? That's right. Okay, now here comes, let us discuss a bit or mention some of the input devices. Storage devices, I'm sorry for this. Now we have what we call flash disk, like we will see down here. We have memory cards. Most of you guys understand or know what we call memory cards. We have CDs and DVDs. We have what we call hard disk and floppy disk. Some of these are what we call storage devices. As we have said, they are used to keep information and data. Now, the flash disk is like this, as you see. It is the flash disk. It is used to keep information and data for sometimes. And at your home, and most of you guys at your house, you used to play music and whatever in your decks or in your TVs through or by the use of what we call flash and memory cards. Floppy disk is also one of the storage devices. However, it was used some years ago, but for nowadays it is not commonly used because it is of little volume. And the CDs and the DVDs, as you see here, these are the storage devices, and the hard disk, as you see over here. Understood, guys? Pupils, is it understood? Yes, okay, thank you. Now let us talk a bit about the illustrations now, the whole package or illustration on how what we call input and output devices are working in the computer or connected to the computer or working to the computer, right? Yes, let us continue with our discussion. Now, the input and output devices are connected to the computer as peripherals, as we have said earlier. Now, input sends data into the computer. After processing, the output is given out through what we call output devices, as per below diagram, whatever we could say. Now, students, our pupils, the input devices, as you see over here, they tend to send data. They tend to send data in the computer for processing. Now, the computer, after getting data from input devices, it tends to process or to manipulate it into output. And the output or the results after processing, they are being given out through these output devices according to the preference of the user. For example, if it is music and you wanted to hear through your what we call a microphone or whatever, what we call headphones, you are going to use headphones to hear what is processed. You are going to use the speakers to hear. You are going to use a printer to print out. You are going to use monitor to have or to see what is processed, and the projector for projection to see what is being processed over there. And the other thing you can hear, or you can hear, you can see the printout or the proto, or the printout from proto, of which it is going to be the big sheet or whatever we could say. Now, pupils, that was all about what we call communication. Okay, now guys, I think we have now gone through the so-called what we call communication. Now, by the way, when it comes to communication, as we have gone through, we have defined what is communication, that it is the process of sending information or ideas from one person to another. And also we have talked about the four major types of communication, of which we have talked about what we call spoken or verbal communication. We have talked about written communication. We have talked about unspoken or non-verbal communication. We have also talked about what we call symbols or signs communication. After talking about these types of communication, we have gone through methods of communication, of which we have talked about the two methods of all ways of communication, which are what we call traditional means of communication and the modern means of communication. We have came to talk about traditional means of communication, of which we have said this is the way of communication that uses what we call local or traditional tools to pass information from one person to another. And we have mentioned some of the examples, like drums, as you see there. We have talked about bells, trumpets, horns, guitar, marimba, and whistles as they concern. From there also we have talked about modern means of communication. This is the way of communication, as we have said, in which it uses modern tools to pass information from one person to another. And some of the what we call tools, as we have said, it includes radio, television, computer, newspapers, telephones, and so many other things. We came to touch on what we call radio as one of the communication tools that transfer audio information. And we have said some of the parts, or we have talked about some of the parts, like speakers, volume button, meter band, antenna, tune button, handle, on or off, what we call button. And again, also I have shown you about the radio and the lookup, and how these what we call speakers, meter bands, handle, antennas are sweated. And also we came to television, of which we have said it is the tool of communication that gives audio, or that gives out what we call audio and video information. The parts of television, as we have gone through, also we have gone through all those parts as it is over there. Things to be remembered, as again I have said, the televisions are of different lookup. However, this is the one which is taken. We have flat screens, as you have seen somewhere here. Also, this is the television, which is a bit different from the one you see over here, but the television may come with different lookup. But the very interesting thing to be there are like these equipments, as we have discussed. And again, we came to what we call telephone. A telephone is an instrument designed to the simultaneous transmission and the reception of what we call human voice. There are different types of telephone, as we have said. So the simultaneous transmission and the reception of human voice is done by what we call telephone. And these kind of telephones are of two types, of which are mobile telephones, like you see over here, these ones, and we have what we call landline telephones, or whatever we could say. Now here, after coming to talk about these telephones, we have talked also about the common things of which are found in each what we call telephone. We have talked about screen, keypad, microphone, speaker, button, of which it is one for off and on, as you see in this drawing. After that, we came to the computer, and we defined the computer as an electronic machine or device that process input into output. Hence, therefore, as we have said, that devices that sends what we call data into the computer are called input devices, while the other are called output devices, of which they give out what have been processed in the computer. And again, also there we have also talked about what we call peripherals. What are peripherals? As I have said, that peripherals are those what we call devices which are attached to the computer for different purposes. And most of the peripherals are likely to be input peripherals, output peripherals, and storage peripherals, as discussed above. So in case someone asks you about defining or giving out input peripherals, you will be able to give out the input devices as the input peripherals, or peripherals of which they used it to send in data for processing, of which some of them are like a keyboard, mouse, webcam, scanner, digital camera, joysticks, what we call microphones, and so on and so on. And again, also we have to talk about examples of input devices. We have talked about output devices. I'm sorry for this. Now the output devices, these are the devices which gives out what have been, or which give out what have been processed in the computer, and that include what we call monitor or screen, the screen, the speaker, the printer, as it should be also taken into account. We have what we call printer as also one of the output devices, of projector, headphones, plotter, and so on, as you see over here. Now, my dear and near friends, we have also talked about what we call storage devices, pupils. Also, we have talked about storage devices that the computer, after processing, or even before processing, these keep what we call information and data are to be kept in somewhere else. And the devices which are used to store those kind of information or piece of data are called storage devices. And some of the storage devices we have gone through: flash disk, memory cards, CDs or DVDs, hard disk, we have gone through proper disk, and so on and so on, as you see over here. These are the so-called storage devices. And we have illustrated to show how input and output devices, what we call work together with. And from there we have talked about input and output devices are connected to the computer, as you see over there, of which I can say they connected to the computer as the peripherals. Now, input and send data into the computer. After processing, the output is given out through the output devices. So as I have said earlier, these output devices are here to give out what have been processed after being input by input devices. So the computer here and the processor is over here to give out, or to manipulate, or to process what have been entered by the input devices. Understood? Yes, that is what we have gone through. And here comes an assignment. Assignment, pupils. Here the question number 1 says, what is communication? That is the question number 1. You have to bear in mind, you do it. And the second question says, how many types of communication are there? Do it. And the third question says, a device that transfers information in the form of audio is called, you just do it. What are the 2 methods of communication? Now, fifth question says, mention any 6 tools which are in modern method of communication. You have to mention any 6 tools which are in modern method of communication. The 6th question says, draw the diagram of a phone and show all the important parts. We have gone through the important parts of the phone, so you have to draw and show those important parts. And the 7th question says, mention 5 computer peripherals that send data in the computer. You have to mention 5 computer peripherals that send data in the computer. And the eighth question says, what is the name given to the device that give out the results from the computer? What is the name given to the devices that give out what we call the result from the computer? That is the question you need to bear in mind. And the last question says, mention 5 output devices. Mention 5 output devices. Thank you for going along with me, pupils. Now this is the end of our today's topic. That is all for today. See you next time. Thank you.